Hello, and welcome to our lesson on project fundamentals. This segment will cover defining project outcomes, a layered approach, goals, and scope. Anyone who has participated in project work has heard terms thrown around that pertain to the outcomes of the project. These often include goals, objectives, scope, requirements, designs, and specifications. Though sometimes used interchangeably, these terms are, in fact, different in how each describes the work to be done. Because of this, using a layered approach, using the terms together in appropriate combinations, can provide a more complete picture of the project as it progresses from the planning stages onward. Before discussing this, we must first find the terms. Goals, often written just as a project starts, provide a context for what the project is trying to achieve. They have the following features. High level, goals provide a view of what the project is trying to achieve without necessarily specifying the specific products or actions needed to achieve them. Because goals are high level, more particular descriptions of project outcomes are needed. Scope statements and requirements, specifications further clarify the project work required to achieve these goals. Measurable, through high-level descriptions that may seem incompatible with the idea of measurement, goals should be defined and, more specifically, wonder, so that it's clear when they have been accomplished. Ambiguity in this area may lead to out-of-control costs of schedules or may indicate operational, non-project work. Reasonable. It is crucial that goals are half self-imposed limits since it's easy to set too lofty goals. Because of this, goals must conform to the capabilities of the time and resources allotted to the team, as well as the organization. This doesn't mean they can't be challenging. They must be reasonably achievable. Some projects employ what are called stretch goals. These are known to be somewhat beyond the normal expectations of the project, but, provided the resources and time are available, could add additional value to the problem or need the project is designed to address. Cross-compatible. Goals must be compatible with each other as well as the mission and objectives of the organization. If goals that seem incompatible are created, more time must be dedicated to sorting out these inconsistencies. Not doing so will most likely have disastrous consequences as the project progresses. The type of language used in describing goals and the number of goals assigned to the project will vary based on the kind of project and what it is trying to accomplish. Here are a few samples, unrelated, of goal statements. From the perspective of the project leader, goals serve as a kind of contract. For the project to be called complete, its goals must be met. Because of this, defining goals is usually one of the first project activities, sometimes even before the project leader or manager has been chosen. The project sponsor may define the goals when the project charter is created. Goals that do not include numerical or black and white indicators need to be clarified. Often, the first responsibility of the project leader is obtaining a clear understanding of the goals, their context, and what would constitute their completion. Objectives are related to goals. As such, the words are sometimes used interchangeably. Objectives describe your project's planned outcomes in more concrete terms. Goals are somewhat more abstract, whereas objectives tend to be more exact. As discussed in the first part of this chapter, projects must be unique and time-limited, and their goals and objectives, as well as scope statements, requirements, and specifications, must follow that same pattern. As time implies, goals mark the beginning of the most abstract element of defining what a project requires. Scope statements and requirements/specifications are increasingly more exact and therefore demand increased effort in determining what they are to be. Scope statements are less abstract than goals or objectives. They more specifically spell out what is and isn't to be included in the project. Simply put, the scope statement defines the boundaries of the project. Other terms that could be used here are reach, breadth, or confines. In the previous section, scope, one side of the project triangle, is defined as what is and isn't included in the project. The scope statement formally describes this for a particular project and is typically in paragraph or list form. By declaring a project scope, you are solidifying that side of the project triangle, leaving the task of defining necessary resources and schedules as separate work. In addition to what is included, the scope definition specifies what isn't included in the project. This can be a little trickier to define. Still, it helps to consider what reasonable people, different stakeholder groups such as management or customers, might falsely assume is a part of the project. Scope statement features list of all major deliverables. Deliverables are simply the products, services, or results a project intends to produce. With as little ambiguity as possible, the scope statement should list the essential parts of the project's planned output. A basic strategy. This implies the high-level steps needed to achieve the project's goals and create deliverables. Though the details will be worked out later, defining these in the scope statement begins to delineate the project as a structured solution to the problem it was initiated to address. Constraints. Those reading the scope statement should have no problem understanding the limit of what is to be produced. An out-of-control scope results in out-of-control budgets and schedules. Some scope statements include a short section explaining the rationale for what is and isn't to be included in the project. External dependencies. Does your project depend on variables outside your control? If possible, define these as conditions or limitations in your scope statement. Assumptions. Similar to dependencies, you may be making assumptions about things like the availability of resources or information. Assumptions are acceptable as long as they are explicitly defined, realistic, and agreed upon by all parties. Here is an example of a scope statement. It includes a basic but straightforward description of what should and shouldn't be included in the projects. This is the end of this segment of our lesson. In the next segment, we shall discuss defining project outcomes, a layered approach, requirement and specifications. This course is presented to you by South Europe College. Thank you for listening and see you on our next segment.